In this video, I'm going to show you what needs to be cut off of the frame when you're doing your solid axle conversion from Tahoverlanding. If you're wondering what needs to be unbolted or removed from the frame, watch episode 1. This episode will focus on getting things cut off.
When doing your solid axle conversion, you've always got to find the exact factory axle center line. And it's not always straightforward because your upper and lower control arms are not evenly spaced in their mounting. They're also castered back, and so there's not a really easy way to find what was the actual factory axle center line. So here's one way of doing it. Jack stands and something straight like this piece of tubing spread underneath the vehicle, and then, you know, with some adjustments and using a tape measure, you can get it square under the vehicle, and then you can start finding the center of the wheel arch to figure out what the factory axle center line was. Now, when you do that, you're actually going to be able to move the axle forward, because that's what you're going to do when you do your solid axle conversion. You're going to move it forward about 1.5 inches to get some better clearance for tire rubbing at the firewall back here and the inner fenders. It just clears a lot better if you move the tire forward just a little bit. All this stuff on the frame here is going to get cut off and messed with, and so what you want to do is find something that's not going to get cut and plated over, like say this body mount back here at the firewall, and find the axle center line from some repeatable point. And that's how you know what your factory axle center line is. And measure from there, write it down, don't forget it, and then that way you can refer back to that anytime you need to verify factory axle center line. You can measure back from somewhere like that body mount, because as you can see, you've got to have some way of transferring from here to the frame. Let's undo this brake line right here. It's bolted to this bracket. I like to use the cutoff wheel and just get a good start. It really makes the Sawzall go a lot faster if you just use a cutoff wheel to get a start on the cut. So there's a weld going across the back right here. We're going to cut that down with a cutoff wheel. cut next to the weld through the material, then what's going to happen is that'll come right off, and then you just have to grind the weld down. So instead of trying to cut the weld itself, sometimes it's easier just to cut. See? Working on getting that ground down. It's not finished yet, but we're getting there. Getting closer. Look at that. That's fairly smooth, at least smooth enough to start. Okay, so now that we've got stuff cut off the frame, ground smooth, and we did scribe on the bottom of the frame where the factory axle center line was, because we can't put it on this side. We're going to cut, grind, and plate over that. So I always put something on the bottom of the frame as a good reference. But we need to come up with level. And the way I like to do that is one of these. It's just a digital angle finder and a ruler from like a square. And the reason why I do that is I like to knock off some of that metal shavings. Okay. So what I like to do is do that, and then I come over here. The frame is definitely level. And click calibrate. Okay, that's 0. And then I come over here. And I move it until it's level. Okay, 0 right there. That is level to the vehicle. Because, you know, however you've got it jacked up or whatever, that could change. So unless you know you have this perfectly level on like a frame table, which none of us have, just do that. Measure it, level it to itself. I scribe on the bottom of the frame where the factory axle center line is. Well, that's that right there. That's factory axle center. And we like to come 1.5 inches from there. So this right here is our new axle center line. Factory axle center line, our new axle center line. And we got to go one more again. Coil mount center line, right here. That right there. Is our coil mount center. All right, so what we've got here is the new axle center line. This is where the new solid front axle is going to be centered. This here is the mark that's going to be the coil mount center line. The Dodge coil mounts on the axle sit about 1 inch further forward, and we find setting it forward about another 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch from there is actually probably the best. It makes the coil springs the most happy when you do that. So then this is the width of the coil mounts. Here's a little extra on either side because we're actually going to plate that in. So we've got to trim this out. So you've already kind of cut here and here. We're going to trim out this bulge. We're going to plate that in. Take a look. Tahoverlanding GMT400 frame plates, specially made just for the GMT400 and the Tahoverlanding axle swap. As you can see, you have to cut a notch out of this bulge. See, the frame kind of bulges right here. You have to cut that out and make this flat for the coil mounts. And these are shaped to take up all the material that's lost and weld in there to strengthen the frame. And you can see these slots here. These are actually so that you can attach this frame plate to this edge of the frame, which would otherwise be flopping around or not really have any any strength because it's got nothing anchored to it. So it's just a little bit extra strength to be added.
All right, this episode, we got everything cut off of the frame that we need to. Stay tuned for the next episode on the next step on your solid axle conversion on your GMT400.